Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Blue Stable Podcast. We are officially back. It's been a while, but we're going to just hop into talk about a little football, Super Bowl recap, Senior Bowl standouts, and free agents going into this offseason. The season of football is officially over, and we are going into 2025. I would say 1-0, but I'm not even going to say that. It's clean slate 0-0, but we appreciate you guys for tuning in. I got my guys, Colts Film Room and Landon Whitby. Colts Film Room, you were sick. You are back. How's your health, and how are you doing?
I'm doing a lot better now. I'm sorry I'm sorry everyone for delaying this show. But now we have more to talk about. The Super Bowl over. A lot more to discuss. Free agency a month from today. So that's exciting. It's going to be combine. I think is 2 weeks from now. Some teams don't even have their head coach yet. So there's a lot to discuss here. And I'm excited to do it.
Well, it's definitely good to see and hear from you. It's good news to hear that you're doing better. Landon, how are we doing, man?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing great. Can't complain. Had a day off today. So anytime you get a little chance for some R&R, it's all good. And just counting down the days now. This is the most fun for me. This is the most fun part of the season, which is kind of like funny because it's like, well, you don't actually like it when the games are being played. It's like, no, I enjoy the process.
Yeah, I agree. I know what you mean.
Yeah. So I'm actually really excited. This is the fun part of the season for me to get into and give you all my biases and all kind of stuff like that, and make everybody angry because it's fun.
Yes, this is definitely a fun part for me as well. I can agree to that. No stress, breathing, waiting until the big moment of draft night when their names get called, and the excitement to see who's getting picked. I love this part too because sometimes I get to go to the draft, so we get to see all of this happens. But just a quick recap: the Philadelphia Eagles wind up defeating the Kansas City Chiefs. No three-peat, but I got to give credit where credit is due. The Kansas City Chiefs had a heck of a run. Did think they were going to pull it off, but like we said before the show, it was some clean football. So clean football is good football. Besides that AJ Brown thing at the beginning of the game, but the Eagles were just all over him. Just giving a huge shout out to Isaiah Rodgers and Nick Sirianni. Both of those guys getting it done. And Paris Campbell. Yeah, and Paris Campbell. Yep. Got to give it to him too. And if Shaq Leonard would have stayed healthy, he would have got one too. But hey, it is what it is. So, just shout out to them. But just a quick recap. Landon, you said you watched the game after. What was your thoughts on the game?
Well, I mean, you can't really tell the story of this game without telling the story of the Philadelphia defense, and just how incredible they performed along the defensive line. That's like the trenches were like the star of this game. If you love trench play, then you probably already think highly of the Philadelphia Eagles. But this game really showcased what it's like at its peak. Whenever you hit on multiple picks, when you have all-pro players on both sides of the trenches at multiple spots instead of just one spot or two spot. I mean, it was literally just a bludgeoning of the other team. They didn't blitz once. They rushed 4 almost every time. They didn't blitz one time during that game, and they had a pressure rate of over 50%. That is absurd. Like, I don't know if people really understand just how like absurd that is. To me, and like this is going to sound pretty crazy, considering all the great defenses that we've seen in the Super Bowl over the last few years, or maybe not the last few years, but just over the last. This is like the best performance I've seen in a Super Bowl, probably from a defensive perspective, probably since Baltimore or Tampa Bay in the early 2000s, and that's even with
or Seattle 2013.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe the Legion of Boom you could put up there.
Manning, that would be the other one.
Yeah, but I even think this was more impressive than that game was. I mean, like what they did just from like a personnel perspective of just rushing forward, dropping all those guys in the coverage, and we've seen now like how much it pays dividends whenever you do hit on those guys and every year it always seems like we go through this process in April where we're talking about like who had the best draft, which teams killed the draft. And consistently over the last half decade to maybe a decade, the Eagles have always been listed in that spot.
I agree.
And so you're starting to see that really pay off now. This last year, I loved what they did. Obviously, they drafted my favorite player, who I wanted, in Quinyon Mitchell, fell all the way down to 22, broke my heart. But yeah, so they drafted him, and then obviously the Cooper DeJean pick there at pick number 40.
And even Jalix Hunt got a sack, a guy who at Houston Christian was an outstanding athlete. And
a lot of Colts mock drafts had him getting picked up, to the Colts actually. So that should be a very familiar name for Colts fans as well, because if you follow Colts mock drafts, Jalix Hunt, he was mocked pretty frequently. So he got a sack. And then, Zach Bond signed as just like a throwaway, like special teams.
Anomaly. Yeah. That's an anomaly. That's so incredibly crazy to see.
Insane.
To change positions, have the year that he had from week one. From
the start.
He was it's not like this guy was
a player of the year candidate.
And it's gonna be very interesting. I put out a tweet today kind of talking about like what the Colts can take from this. And like obviously you have to understand that some of the stuff that Howie has done has been like an anomaly. Like the Zach Bond that you can find a Zach Bond. Yeah, that's really it's way easier said than done. Or it's like when you think about Howie's journey with the Eagles, it's like the Carson Wentz trade in a lot of ways saved his job, because
he was on the hot seat there.
He was on the hot seat there for a second. There was a lot of criticism when he drafted Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. A lot of noise in Philadelphia.
There was a lot of noise whenever he drafted even Jalen Hurts in the second round when they already had Carson Wentz.
Yeah, that was the year before, I think. Yeah, so like there was a lot of time, and then basically traded away in 2021. Traded away Carson Wentz,
the number 2 overall pick.
Yeah, the number 2 overall pick. Highly criticized at the time. But one of the things that I kind of had talked about is, and this is kind of probably thinking about like what's gone wrong with the Chris Ballard era, because there's a lot of nuance to it. It's not just like he sucks, but he hasn't been great. The results speak for himself, but there's just evaluating the context. And it's like how he does that. I'm so confused as to why Chris Ballard has never done is weaponize the greatest asset there is in the NFL, and that's job security. Here's the trade. And because this wasn't the bare bones of the trade, by the way, because Howie basically took what he got from the Colts and turned that into more future picks, which resulted in these 3 guys and Cooper DeJean, who's not even on the graphic unless he's on the text. But that's the type of stuff that I've always thought Chris Ballard could have benefited more from, where like he's been around now for 9 years. He has a very patient owner, and that's an asset in every single trade negotiation. And you see the best players that I think that Chris Ballard has drafted when you think about Darius Leonard and then you think about Michael Pittman Jr., only 2 guys that have been drafted from a future asset, with the Jets for the Quentin Nelson trade and then the Commanders trade. I'm blanking on when that was, but that was who they got it from.
That was, I think, like it was 2019, 2020.
It was a trade down in a draft that he traded for future picks.
Because they passed up Montez Sweat.
And those are 2 that has worked out for him. And I think that what Howie does that's so admirable, among other things, is that he will take advantage of people who are desperate for current assets, whether that's a player on the board that you're in love with, that you need to have. And he will say, that's fine, but we're going to trade you for an objectively better asset in a future year and make you pay, because general managers honestly don't care about picks 2 years from now. Or the track record shows they don't. They care about what they can do today to fix their stuff, and they don't care about tomorrow. They are willing to sacrifice tomorrow to get better today. Howie Roseman hasn't, and you don't build this roster in 1 year. It's accumulated over you. You don't just like randomly have an offseason of Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and then also have 9 picks in the draft this year. So like it's built up. He's done it very quickly, but the process has been building up basically since 2020.
I would agree. And the thing about it, the Eagles, is that they've been like in the hunt the whole time. So it's just an amazing process.
And
And
that's yeah. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead, go ahead.
Well, that's what I was saying. Where it's like the other thing I wrote in there was like, and this kind of goes because I think the biggest storyline that the Colts are going to have, no matter who they sign, no matter who they draft, is Anthony Richardson, and that's going to be such a big storyline. And I think the one thing that this teaches you is that you play this game to win, not to have a quarterback that makes splash plays. And I think Jalen Hurts, who's been criticized all year because it hasn't looked the same, but at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is the W in the win column. And, you know, the rest of the teams, we can sit here and the media can argue about who's the best quarterback and whatever, but Jalen Hurts is the one with the trophy and the ring at the end of the day. I think that tells you that no matter how good your quarterback is, it still always is a team sport. It's going to take every single last guy on your roster to make it happen. Obviously, the quarterback can impact the game from snap to snap at a level, and that they get the attention for a reason. But it's not impossible to. And I still think Jalen Hurts is a great quarterback because he made all the plays when he needed to. Not saying he's not bad. I wouldn't maybe say that the talent is the exact same as, you know. You're right. It doesn't look the same. People are right that it doesn't look the same as some of these elite guys, but he does exactly what he needs to win every single time. And the splash plays might not be there as much. And I think that's a lesson that you can take from it.
There's something to be said too. And this, so like, I am a massive Jalen Hurts fan.
I am as well, for the
record.
Yeah,
like I've loved the kid since he was at Alabama. I love, and I think for me, not only am I excited for him, but this shows a different type of process to me that a lot of times gets lost in translation whenever you're evaluating guys and looking at guys. And it has to do with not only, obviously we know like the physical the rocket arm, the legs, all this stuff. But the most important aspect from a quarterback is in here, and it's in here. And that's something that Jalen Hurts has displayed in like that. There's a reason why this guy has won at a high level since high school. He won state championships. He won national championships. He goes to the NFL, has been in the MVP discussion. He's now
won the playoffs every year that he's been a starter.
Yeah, I mean,
he lost to Tom, and he lost twice to the Bucs, to Tom Brady and to a team that kind of hobbled in.
That's a rough one. Eagles going to regret it in 3 years. Oosh. I didn't even see that comment under there. That's brutal.
You definitely have to go back. Well,
we're not.
Yeah. I mean, Colts film hasn't been around to talk about Jalen Hurts, but I've been a big fan of Jalen Hurts. I think that again, a lot of this, I'm also the opinion that the quarterback rankings have become so popular yet are so meaningless. At the end of the day, the Eagles won the game not just because of Jalen Hurts, but because of the entire 52 guys that they had out
there. And really, this goes to show once again, and I know like it gets so old. I know I've said it a million times. I know you've heard it a million times, but like it really does matter. Like defense is such a massive part of winning football games, especially
in the NFC. Especially in the NFC.
And not only that, but just like to be in the championship discussion, look at the Chiefs run. The Chiefs, I know Patrick Mahomes gets all the credit, and I get that because he's a great player, all-time great player. But that being said, the Chiefs have had a top 10 scoring defense. Basically, have had a top 10 defense from the moment Patrick Mahomes stepped on the field. I don't think he's ever, outside of maybe a year or two, I know they kind of had a little down year, and they still had success, which is credit to him. But for the majority of his career, they've had a great defense. Tom Brady with the Patriots and the Buccaneers, great defense. Peyton Manning in Denver, and even in Indianapolis that year during the playoffs. The defense turned on in Indianapolis. That's really what won them the game. Peyton Manning didn't play that. I know he was Super Bowl MVP, but he did not have a good postseason. Dominique Rhodes should have been MVP, by the way, and I'll die on that. I will die on that take.
I don't think
I will die on that hill. But then
the quarterback gets it too often. It's a
it's a quarterback award, which I think hurts. Because you can't really single out and single defensive player that deserve it because the whole
Cooper DeJean
defense-
probably would have been the other guy you could have put up there. But
well, that and
Vaughn.
well, no, we'll see. This is where we're going. Who the guy that he had 2.5 sacks, almost broke the record.
Josh Sweat.
Yeah, Sweat. Like he could have easily won it as well. So
Free agent, by the way.
Yeah, we can because I think they're gonna. I mean, and we're not an Eagles podcast, but
like this Colts. But when I'm looking at it though, and like this is, and I made this point like a few weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, and I got a lot of hate from it, which it is what it is. But this Colts offense, right? They were 17th in the league, 17th. So right around league average. The Colts defense, on the other hand, obviously is in the back 5, right? Like one of the worst 5 defenses in football if you go by multiple metrics. If the Colts even just had an average defense, right? This is an 8-win team. If the Colts defense, instead of being 28th, what if it was 17th, like the offense? With how many one-score games that they were in?
Yeah.
Do you think they make the playoffs?
Yes.
So
I think. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, so I'm saying like that's why like going into this process of free agency and the draft and all this stuff, like I'm much more bullish on like, man, we've got to get this defense.
I agree.
Like,
I think
it has to be priority number 1.
Yeah.
People have been getting on me about the tight end thing, and like I understand it, but and I'm not saying completely ignore tight end. That just because I don't want one guy in the first round doesn't mean I'm saying like let's just punt tight end and run it back.
Yeah.
It's not but I'm just saying like this is how always gets lost in translation.
Yeah, like so what you want? Let's just sign them all. Yeah.
Well, who are we going to have to play tight end if we don't draft this? Like that's not what I'm saying. But it's such an important factor of like you've brought in Lou Anarumo, so you've taken the first step, very similar to what Philadelphia did last year. They were 30th in defense, and a lot of very similar to where the Colts are right now. They went out, brought in Vic Fangio, invested in their secondary to help him run his scheme, and allowed all of those draft picks along the defensive line. Whenever you have coverage, which is what you've seen yesterday, I mean, the defensive line was getting after it regardless. But that being said, a lot of the times, like Philadelphia took away a lot of those throws, like Cooper DeJean, Zach Bond, and in the middle of the field.
Avante Maddox.
Yeah, I mean, like they had a lot of players that they played tight, like great coverage. They ran zone a lot, and they just allowed those defensive linemen to go after and like, hey, like we're not worried about it. Just go get the quarterback. They did it, and you saw the result. And I think the Colts are like, very weirdly, they're in a very similar situation. Like they have a really good top 2 interior with DeForest Buckner in them. They've invested a lot of things on the edge with Latu and Kwity Paye, and we'll see if Dio or Taekwon or whoever else is back, but the
defensive line's good. I guess that's my hottest Colts take is that the defensive line was pretty good last year.
Yeah, I agree. Noticed that. Yeah, and that's kind of like my point I'm making is like I think the defensive line, it has a chance to be special, but you have to give them a chance to be special. And with Philadelphia going out and investing their first 2 picks, in Quinyon Mitchell, and then adding Cooper DeJean. And I don't even think the Colts secondary is as bad as what the Eagles were last year. Like you already have Kenny Moore there. You already have Nick Cross there. You really just need to target like boundary guys and, maybe a safety. And you need more players.
You need quality players in the secondary. So just to backtrack, I think the biggest thing that played the Colts last year was the fact that they could not put together a complete game. Like when you go look at their metrics, it's so weird because basically anytime the defense did something good, the offense couldn't get into the red zone. I'm thinking the Joe Flacco games. Could not get into the red zone or could not score. The times that the offense decided they wanted to play really well, the defense like in Jacksonville, I'm thinking Detroit was different because Detroit actually they played really well, but they got all the penalties yardage. That's actually what's kind of screwed them over in that game. The Jets game, the Patriots game, like the Patriots game, they kind of struggled, but they turned it into a straight shootout. And there were so many, even the Giants game, the Giants offensively, the offense was not necessarily bad, but the defense could not get off the field. So that honestly is why the Colts were not in this, in the game. And then the Broncos was kind of a mix of the two, where basically the defense started out hot, the offense started out hot, and they just both crumbled. So I think when you look at like the similarities to Philadelphia in terms of the way that they faltered down the stretch, which I guess you can, and the Colts don't have a direct comparison to that necessarily, but being able to bring in a new defensive coordinator in a new scheme, B, find the weaknesses and go out and aggressively attack those weaknesses. I mean, Howie basically said, yeah, we have the league's worst secondary probably.
We're going to remake
We're going to retool the entire thing. We're going to bring back CJ Gardner-Johnson, who was good for us and is on the open market. We are going to bring it. We're going to draft
the next Slay.
And we're going to draft Slay. We're going to draft DeJean. And hopefully with this new scheme, and here's the thing about the Vic Fangio scheme, because he's touted as this like insanely amazing defensive coordinator, which he is, Hall of Fame defensive coordinator.
It's very simple.
Their scheme is very simple, and it's not the same thing as Gus Bradley, but it's the ability to play fast and simple is good when you have elite players. You don't need to do complicated things because they can just beat you with technique, fundamentals, and all the basic things that win football games. You don't need to do these crazy exotic pressures.
Look at how well they tackled in that game yesterday. Like, exactly. Like the secondary tackling was perfect. I mean,
and the pass rush got home with 4 every single time. And that's the thing where like that is something that the Colts could not afford to do, because I think people are like, oh, Charlie Partridge is back. Like, why? The defensive line took a step back. And it's like, well, the defensive line, the only thing is sacks is a secondary stat just as much as it's a defensive line stat. I thought when you watch the defensive line, you could see them get after the passer, challenge offensive tackles, get off the ball, all those things.
They would punish them too. Like how many times did we see, where they tried to block Latu with a tight end, and they were punished for that. Like Latu made them pay.
And the other thing is just DeForest Buckner is so underappreciated, league wide, but maybe even within the Colts too, because people know that he's a stud. I'm not sure that they really realize that he is the best player probably on the entire team that features some good players. Like, he had an unreal year despite being out. Came in and dominated versus the Bills, dominated versus the Patriots, I'm just thinking straight domination. The Vikings game, he was a game wrecker. There's probably more that I'm missing, but he came in and was unblockable at times. And as I'm looking through his year, I'm seeing so many times where the quarterback takes 3 steps, balls out, 5-yard gain, balls out, 6-yard gain. He wins on the rush, but just doesn't have the time. And I think that's going to be. That's kind of what I tweeted out when the Colts were looking for a defensive coordinator, is like they got eaten alive by quick game. You would see these long sustaining drives. Their time of possession the entire year was all off kilter for the fact that they could generate all these explosives early, like, and get off the field so quickly, put their defense right out there that would just get killed and kind of death by a million paper cuts. So I don't think the Colts are necessarily close to being anything where the Eagles are. They don't have any kind of playoff experience on this roster, but what they do have is enough pieces on the team to build something that can still be competitive. I don't think this is a doom and gloom situation. I do think that if they have a good offseason, they are probably closer to the contention of the AFC South than some would believe.
Amen to that. A million paper cuts.
But this is probably the biggest offseason of the Chris Ballard tenure for sure.
Oh,
yeah, because it's either going to be. I mean, this is by far the biggest offseason because this might be his last.
Yes,
I mean,
and with a new quarterback class, who knows if Anthony Richardson is the new potential regime? Who knows about Shane Steichen going into his 3rd year? So, a lot of unknowns that could easily be solved with one great year. So,
and really, and this kind of like whenever I was talking about like the Jalen Hurts thing, is what really gets undervalued, especially when we're drafting players, and the combine comes, and we'll go through this again here in a few weeks, where we see these insane testing numbers, and these guys are just blowing us out of the water. It's like, oh my gosh, like look at this tight end ran a 4.5 at 260.
He's already starting the narrative. Like,
I'm not even talking about them. Yeah, I am. But or look at this defensive tackle running a 4.8, which is insane, and he's 285 pounds. Like, and we're all going to just get blown in by these testing numbers. But the thing about Jalen Hurts is, and really why he's been able to win at such a high clip everywhere he's been, is not only like the work ethic, because you could see it in real time in college. Like, this guy improved by a substantial margin every single year he played football. Every year. There was never a regression. It was always the trajectory was going up. And on top, so like that for one speaks to his work ethic, right? And then on top of that, the leadership skills are so undervalued, because if your quarterback, if your leader is your hardest worker, that sets the tone for the entire franchise. If your highest paid player, and he is by far their highest paid player, making $52 million, I think, this year. If he is your leader and your hardest worker, there's no excuse for anybody else on the roster, because it's like, well, look at how much money this guy's making, and he's outworking all of us. And
I think Shane Steichen, who coached him, said the best part about Jalen Hurts is his obsession. The guys who are the best in this league are obsessed with the game at an entire.
And he's been like that since college, and that was a big reason why I had him as my quarterback too in that draft right behind Burrow, because I'm sitting there and I'm watching this guy, and I was like, man, this guy's relentless. Like, he improves every year, and he has the physical tools. He has a good arm. He's obviously has the legs. Like, if you can put it together, this guy's a chance to be really special in the NFL. And he gave me no reason to think that he was not going to put it together, because every year he got better. And then you add in the intangible stuff to that. There's a reason why. So, like, to me, I think like that's the next evolution of like Anthony Richardson, is like, obviously this offseason you go through there with Chris Hewitt, and you rework your tools and all that stuff, but you come back next year, like, are you leading this team from like a leadership perspective, from a work ethic perspective? And I think like that's kind of what DeForest Buckner, when Buck talked about it, and he was saying, I took him under his wing, and he took Anthony under his wing, and they went through a bunch of stuff, and especially after the benching happened and everything like that. Like, how much does this grow from here? Like, is he going to come in?
The story is not written. I think if you want to learn anything from Jalen Hurts, the story is just not written on Anthony Richardson. I think that one of the narratives that kind of feels out there with the quarterback competition and everything is like, this is like a situation where the Colts have one foot out. And I don't necessarily know that that's the case. And I'm not sure that the whole season was this. Like, there were still some special things that you just can't give up on. If Anthony Richardson was on the trading block, which he was, quote unquote, he never was, but like teams called about him. If he was publicly being traded, there are a lot of quarterback needy teams that would jump immediately at the chance to go coach him.
Oh yeah.
Like, this is not a story, in my opinion, for a guy who's still 22, by the way, to like, this story is not written. And I think Jalen Hurts is a great example of like, all you can do is keep getting better every day, ignore all the doubt, which I think, to his credit, 2024 was a hard year for Anthony Richardson. I don't think we're privy to all the things that are happening behind the scenes in the exact detail or the perspectives that happen. Clearly, a lot has happened, but the outside noise essentially just ran with it, and his organization didn't do a lot to protect him from that. And he's taken it in stride. Cordial, seems like a great dude. So I'm excited to see it, but the story's not. I think if Jalen Hurts can teach anything, the story's not written.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that he can learn from a guy like Jalen Hurts. And I think there's a lot that Shane Steichen can do to teach him. Really,
Jalen Hurts better than Shane Steichen. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Is like Shane Steichen had a front row seat to Jalen Hurts and his development in the NFL and how that really played. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's basically like, regardless of everything that's going on, once again, this falls on the shoulders of Anthony Richardson. But to what Ben was saying is like, you don't have to. And like I spoke on this at the beginning of the year too, before the season started. It's like that was my biggest worry, is like there was going to be so much on his shoulders to lift this team up. And this goes to show you that if
The
you do,
AFC, the AFC just is too into that. The quarterback that puts the team on his shoulders, and like, look at what happened in Cincinnati.
yeah, perfect example is what happened with Joe Burrow. So, yeah, it's to me, you can go out and you can, we can add Debo Samuel and we can add George Kittle and we could add this guy and this guy on offense. But if the defense does not get to league average, none of it's going to matter. I think the Colts offense is much closer to being a very good unit than the defense is. And so I'm excited to see how they attack this. And that's something we're probably about to talk about here in a minute. So
yeah, I think the other thing too with the AFC, just analyzing, because it's a little bit different. It's the AFC has the path to get there is a lot tougher. You're going to have these guys that there is no defense that you could call versus Josh Allen in certain. I mean, that's kind of funny because there is, but like for the most part, there are guys that can make these special plays in the absolute biggest moments where there is no true defense for it. But I agree that you can't. There's no such thing. Despite that, the quarterback can in this conference can lift you to winning the AFC. Like having a guy like Mahomes or Lamar or Josh Allen, the inverse is true that you can't walk in with the 30th ranked defense and expect to be competitive or expect to even be there at the first place. So I think the defense is a major focus of this team. I think they have a lot of good pieces on offense. I would say that it doesn't, when you start thinking about like offensive pieces, I would start thinking with like 2 to 3 years in mind, as opposed to building around guys just for this year. So that I think that there are some pieces. It's not a neglect the offense thing because that had missed some spots as well. But I do agree with Landon that I think defense is where you brought in Lou Anarumo here for a reason. You are changing things up at a pivotal time for a reason. There's a lot of glaring holes on the defensive side of the ball, and I think that's what we can talk about.
Yeah, and we'll see if they learn, because it's very similar to, and this is what we hope, that they learn their lesson from the Gus Bradley thing. It's like, I don't think just overnight Gus Bradley forgot how to, like, was I ever a fan of his scheme and his defense? Not really. But if very similar to Philadelphia and Vic Fangio, if you have the players and you have the horses, it can work at a very high level.
And that's why we saw some moments. We saw some moments. We did. Yeah. Like I believe that. Like I truly believe that. Like Gus gets really the short end of the stick on a lot of this because the defense was not good. Like you are what your results are, and the defense was not good enough. He knew the writing was on the wall. He knew that he was gone after the Giants game, but they had some moments that I don't think that they get credit for sometimes. Like when I think. Week 1 in Houston, I thought the defense played really well. If you think about it, they were really an unreal throw from CJ Stroud to Nico Collins away from winning that game. I mean, that was as tight as it gets. I thought they played Houston well both times. Obviously, Houston kind of limped in with their offense, kind of limped into the playoffs this year with their offensive scheme and made a bunch of changes there. But I thought they played them well. I thought that they had some moments versus Buffalo. They had the 2 picks, I want to say. Denver in the first half played really, really good football. So I think they had their moments. But again, the biggest thing with the Colts is they couldn't put together a complete game when one unit was having a good, and it pretty much went like that the entire year.
Oh, yeah, it was the whole year.
So, which is like crazy to think about that they went 0. Like even, I guess the closest thing that they had was the Titans game, but even then the Titans game was way too close for comfort. So like,
I was gonna say the fourth quarter of that game, things just fell apart. So,
so yeah, maybe we can talk about free agency needs.
Yes, absolutely. And I have it right here for you. The free agents for the Colts, the list is here. It's not as big as you would want it to be, but actually I can make it a full screen layout. No. So you got Ryan Kelly, Marley Cox, Joe Flacco, EJ Speed, Julian Blackman, Doolin, Taven Bryan, Dio, Danny Pinter, Ronnie Harrison, Mark Lewinsky, David Long, Trey Sermon, Kylan Granson, Winfrey, Ellinger, Fries, Stewart, Dembo, French, and Cole. All free agents for the Colts. We can go Landon and then Colts film room with players you would bring back. Of course, you probably want to do a full rebuild from this list, but there's a few players I would probably want back, but we
Should we
won't
go
be
one by
opposed.
one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can do that. Which, I mean, to me, like, so a lot of it, whenever you're talking about guys you want brought back, a lot of it's price dependent, right? Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, like,
I'm glad you said that.
if
I'm
you
really
can bring
glad.
Ryan Kelly back on a 1 year, $3 million deal, I'd probably be okay with bringing Ryan Kelly back.
Yeah, all these guys are market value.
So the way that I think about this is there's probably 0 guys this year compared to, which is different from last year, because the running back problem, and I think Landon and I are pretty lockstep on this, is that like nobody is blaming Chris Ballard for signing Grover Stewart, Michael Pittman Jr., and Kenny Moore back. That everyone would have done that.
Right.
It was the obsession he had of bringing everyone back after a mediocre year and adding no new talent.
Adding nothing else.
But this year, for me, I don't see any immediate players that I am like, I have to have back. There is probably 0 players on there that the Colts can probably go into this offseason, unlike with Pittman and Kenny Moore and Grover Stewart. I don't see any guys that they are looking to have back. I think the closest to making this list would be Will Fries, if the medical is okay. So the medical is going to be a big part of what the Colts are looking to do there. If the medical comes back, fine. He was one of the better right guards in football to begin the year, and had a really good year. That injury is a little scary, so I think they're going to get that a little bit of a bargain there. But if the medical, they feel nobody knows the medical better than the Colts do, so I could see them bringing them back. But other than that, I think a lot of these are like, you won't see them signed early into free agency. And it could be a type of thing where like, these are the plan B guys if we don't get our plan A's.
Yeah, that's kind of like where I stand too. Is like, I mean, maybe, some players down the list that, the ends that I would kind of be like Grant Stewart. I think Grant Stewart.
I'm so glad you said that, because I was about to be mad.
Yeah, like I would be okay bringing Grant Stewart back for a cheap deal, just because obviously what he brings you on special teams, and he has been able, like, during an injury.
Yep.
Yeah, like, he does provide good depth at linebacker. If he has to go in, he's not like a huge liability if he has to go in and play snaps.
I think Doolin is a guy I think that they value for their special teams as well.
Yeah.
And
it's a guy Ashton Doolin, and the wide receiver room is good. Like, you're not really looking to go out and add, a Stephon Diggs or a Debo Samuel or somebody,
which is weird for the Chris Ballard era. Yeah,
we're going into the offseason. That's what's crazy about, like, so all these players that have come available, right? Like Myles Garrett, Debo Samuel, maybe Micah Parsons. All these players that have come available are actually at points where the Colts are relatively strong.
Yeah, exactly. I think that they drafted A.D. Mitchell, and I think that the first year did not go the way that people wanted to. I'm not saying it's over. I thought A.D. Mitchell also showed some really nice things that they're going to be interested in for the future. I do think they have to think, and this is kind of what I was going to, I think they have to think 3 years in mind with their wide receiver room, because Alec Pierce is now heading into a contract year. That's a little bit iffy, because I think he's probably going to want a larger deal maybe than what the Colts would want to pay out, and maybe would be better off not paying out potentially. So I think that they have to think. That's why they drafted A.D. Mitchell, I think, in the first place. So you're right. I think, and then at the edge, like edge rusher, like are they in a position right now to give up multiple firsts for Myles Garrett or Micah Parsons? Like, absolutely not. So and it's not like a dying need. There's teams way more desperate for guys than them. So,
yeah. And like, that's that would be one of those things where, like, if the Colts had already had, the pieces in place and they were in the playoffs and they were competing and they wanted that last, great player to push them over the edge. I think that could be an option. as well. But right now, it's not just, and I know we've spoken about this before. Whenever you're looking at what they need, it's not just about quality either. Like you need quality, but they need quantity. Like they need depth. They need a lot of guys, and not just in the secondary. I was talking to Marcus before the show. Like if they do decide to move on from Braden Smith, I think everybody's just completely underestimating the offensive line situation. I think everybody thinks you move on from Ryan Kelly, you cut Braden Smith, you put Bordolini and Gonzalez in, and we're good as gold. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. Like, and
I don't either.
Who knows what happens with Fry? Like, even if you bring back Fries, I would love to see competition there. I don't think, I don't know if it's really wise to move on from Braden Smith if everything is okay with this. Obviously, we don't know what's going on with him. But if everything checks out and he's good to go, like
it's not by accident that Ryan Kelly inserts himself into the lineup and they rush for 300 yards with Jonathan Taylor. Yeah. I did think that he was over. The biggest downfall for Ryan Kelly has not been anything he's shown on a football field, in my opinion. It has been the fact that he's had the injury bug for a little bit too long, and that's going to affect his contract status and what the Colts are probably willing to pay, where he could find it elsewhere, if that makes sense, because teams will go do that elsewhere. I think the Colts probably saw the writing on the wall, did what I thought was a smart move at the time in drafting Bordolini and Gonzalez. But you're absolutely right that I thought both of them, Bordolini and Gonzalez, both showed some good things and have futures in the league for sure. But acting like they're just going to walk in and be, then we're just gonna have a Bernhard Raimann situation. Like that's just not gonna. Like you can't just guarantee.
Yeah, and that's why and once again, call a lot of hate for this, and I get it, but if a guy like Will Campbell falls, or maybe some of the other tackles, like maybe if they select another offensive lineman in the first round, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like I don't think that's a terrible move.
I don't either. It would depend who's on the board. Can I trade down? There's a lot
of factors in it, but if they decide to go that route, am I going to be disappointed? Because
how did free agency go?
A lot of people have conveniently forgotten, once Ryan Kelly did go, basically once Fries went down and once Kelly went down, the pressure rate on Anthony Richardson was pretty high. Especially in they were not a very good pass blocking unit. They did very well in the run game, right? Really good road graders, really went out there and pushed people around the run game. But when it comes to pass protection, they were not that great for about the second half of the season. And so I think
which does happen to rookies. I want to point that out sometimes, that you'll see that they're not used to the bull rush that they see at the next level. It's just a different level. And that's where I thought they got kind of beat there. And the get off too as well.
Yeah. So it's different. And, the hope is if you do make those moves, that those guys come in and maybe you're able to add, some veterans for depth pieces and stuff. There's a lot of things that could go right, but I just don't think it's a given. So I think the offensive line really,
I think running back is a big priority, now this draft is big. So you have to see what they can identify. I think they need a guy. I mean, they've straight up told you at this point that Jonathan Taylor does not come in pure passing situations, which is actually similar to the Eagles in a little bit of a sense, where people view Saquon as the bell cow, and he absolutely is. But there are times that Saquon came off the field in 2-minute situations for Kenny Gainwell. So I think that they ran it back with Trey Sermon, who showed some things, but I'm not sure that he's done enough, especially to figure out. I mean, they don't even have a guy under contract. I'm not sure I think Goodson might still be under contract for them, who's shown some things, especially as a special teamer. He's been a great special teamer. But they need that guy. So that's going to be a priority there on offense for me. But I totally agree with Landon that the offensive line, you almost don't need to worry about it in a sense, because Ballard's going to prioritize it whether we like it or not. So you might groan, you might be, what are we doing? But they're not going to let the offensive line slack. It's too important.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too. It's a position that it's very funny from a fan perspective, where you don't really know that you need it until you need it. You know,
because
like,
they don't.
you don't
Yeah,
think about it until things are going wrong.
Exactly.
And then you're like, yeah.
You don't until, or you see like the one pancake, you know, and you're like, oh, this offensive line's great. And I think the one thing they can say is they have a left side of the line that they really, really like, that should be around. I mean, Bernhard Ryman's going to get a contract here in the next couple of years. I don't think Ryan Kelly is the type of thing for me where they're going to let him hit the open market and they're going to say, let's see what you get. If he comes with a deal, he gets a deal right off the bat. And I think there's some center needy teams that would absolutely take a veteran presence and probably overpay than what the Colts are willing to. If he decides to take that, that's fine. They will probably put what they think he's worth and want him back. If not, I think that they're ultimately prepared for Bortolini to be the next guy. Now I think it goes to right tackle and Braden Smith. Obviously, unclear what's happening with Braden Smith or what's going on there. I know the Colts do save a good bit of money if they do go that route. Now, I think, what do they do with Gonzalez? Because Gonzalez was the type of guy who had to play some different positions last year, if you remember. When Bernhard Ryman was out with a concussion, they kind of had a rotating stall in the right guard. So there's a real possibility that the Colts are operating with an entire new right side of the line in 2024, and I just don't think that's like a copy-paste scenario. Do I think it's probably a first-round pick? Probably not when you think about the other needs, but they're not going anywhere if they just don't address it entirely. So it's important to point out.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely, man. I was looking at that free agent market that you guys discussed, and I was like, there's a lot of talent out there. But of course, the depth pieces is definitely a huge part going into this offseason. As you mentioned, this might be the biggest one this year for Ballard and the guys. But hopefully they out there make some moves. There's a lot of names out there, a lot of people available. Hopefully they'll wait till maybe late day 2 to day 3. Don't get robbed out of contracts. But we'll see what they do. The last topic of discussion, the Senior Bowl. Senior Bowl takeaways. You guys pretty much watched a little bit on that. It was a good one. Looks like the American team took it away. There was a few standouts, but I'll get you guys input on that. Looks like the trenches got a lot of talent out there for those guys. Coach Finbroom, what was your thoughts on the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, so I'm still working through a lot of the draft guys because I've been spending so much time learning about Lou Anarumo's defense and how that's going to go. I would say that if you look at what the Colts have done in the past, they prioritize the Senior Bowl just as much as anyone out there. They love their Senior Bowl guys, so that's always an important part of their process for them. For me, I am really impressed with a lot of obviously the tight ends. I think they came in. Mason Taylor had himself a week. Same with Elijah Arroyo. They performed really well. I'm interested to see more from this defensive line. I think that's also another, I think O-line, D-line will be a need as long as Chris Ballard's the GM, or really as long as a smart GM is in place. Your O-line, D-line is a need every single year. There's not guys that just return 5 starters on both those sides of the ball there. So interior, because I mean, with no disrespect to Taven Bryant, when DeForest Buckner has to come off the ball, it just wasn't great. And I didn't think when the Colts had entered that scenario with signing him back for I think it was like a $1 million, $2 million deal, whatever it was very cheap, vet minimum, even close to. I didn't think that he would be the rotational 3 technique and they would use him in the manner that he did. And then when Buckner went down, you could really, really notice a difference. And I think that that's something that they have to say to themselves. Okay, well, Buckner's by no means old. Grover Stewart's by no means old. But if there's a guy sitting there in, maybe the 4th round and we really like him, I don't think that that's outlandish for them to go that way as well.
Yeah. And it's important actually too to because they've tried to address it, in previous years, like with Adetomiwa Adebawore and, some other guys as well. And it just hasn't worked. So obviously hitting on players is pretty crucial. But, you look at your interior guy, along the offensive line, which you're just talking about, the Zabel kid from North Dakota State.
Gray Zabel, yeah.
Yeah, had a really, really good year. Maxwell Hairston, cornerback from Kentucky, really good week as well. Darius Alexander, another interior defensive lineman that you were talking about, which I don't, he could play his way back into the first round, maybe the second round type of conversation. But Shamar Stewart, probably gonna look at maybe like a top 10 pick. So there's a lot of guys that came out and showed I echo what you said with the tight end room. Like, this tight end class is so deep. There are so many players.
Let's do the Tyler Warren segment, because I'm going to give my thoughts on Tyler Warren. I know you have yours, because you're right.
I'm here for it.
Is so deep. So let me say this: if you talk to me, I've been on this train since August, by the way. So like, I think
peep the name there. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But I can be unbiased. I can be unbiased here. Tyler Warren, I still think, is objectively one of the better players of the class. However, it might just not make. I think the fit is also perfect. You couldn't find a better perfect fit. When you look at what the Colts need, and then you also look at the depth of the tight end class, the fact that you can find a guy like a Mason Taylor potentially in that second round, or some of those guys, the tight end room has to get fixed. I think it will get fixed in some capacity. There's a real possibility that Tyler Warren isn't even on the board by 14. So
I've seen a lot of mocks today that had him going around 7 and 9 and 11.
He's gonna, and then wait to the combine. He will creep up there. I think it's a very realistic possibility that he is gone before the Colts he even gets to 14. I think when you look, when people have talked about the top end talent and in this class, and it's a little bit like there's not as much. And this is kind of what I'm still working my way through it, but I have not seen a lot of the upper echelon elite guys, and it's a lot of, oh my God, there's a lot of depth from rounds 2 to 4. Yeah. Agreed. And that's where I think that you'll say to yourself, okay, who's going to be on the board at 14? That's a huge question. And then if Tyler Warren is there, do you have that conversation? I think you absolutely do. I think that's
and you should.
And that's the type of guy that, in my opinion, the Colts are going to. You're going to see him interview at the combine. I could see if they're going to be at the pro day. There's going to be I wouldn't be surprised if you see a top 30 visit, although the Colts are sneaky with their top 30 visits, so maybe not. A
lot of times, like with the Colts, especially, like the guys that they draft, especially those first rounders, they don't have hardly any contact with.
Ballard is very good at playing that game where you're not going to know. Again, everyone thought he was in on Will Levis. Everyone thought he was in on Quinyon Mitchell to the day of the draft. The Colts were a Quinyon Mitchell team.
And he should have. So.
To be fair, if Latu was off the board, would they have been a Quinyon Mitchell team? Potentially. You could sit there and say that. I don't know. Don't have that information. But kind of that Tyler Warren thing, I'm as big of a fan of the player. There's also a chance he's not there, and I don't think that this is like a Tyler Warren or bust situation. I don't think it's ever that with the NFL draft, and I certainly don't think it's that for a tight end when you look at this roster. The tight end is an absolutely need. They absolutely have to get better at that. They need a guy there, 100%. Is that, and it's a massive need. But when you look at where the Colts could get better immediately and make real impact into winning games, I'm not sure that would be there, if that makes sense.
It makes, and that's my entire thought on it. Is when you look at the impact when it comes, because my main goal next year, and it should be the main goal every year, for some reason it's not, is winning football games, right? Like that's the main goal, and that seems to be where this regime and where this fan base has really lacked perspective in the last decade. Is winning football games matters. It matters more than the process. It matters more than anything else. None of the other stuff matters if you are missing the playoffs. What your record was over the last 10 years. Oh, we have a better record than Houston over the last decade. None of that matters right now. Zero. Like winning football games matters. And so when I'm looking at like, okay, how does this team take this off season, transition it into next year and win games, finally get to the playoffs, finally push for that AFC South crown, which they haven't won in a decade. Like, how do we get over this hump? It's it's simple to me. And this is not me saying to not address the tight end. That is not what I say at all. Whenever I argue against Tyler Warren in the first round, that doesn't mean I think Tyler Warren sucks. That doesn't mean
I actually think you think the opposite. I think you think he's great and won't
I
even
think
be
he's a
there.
great player. I think he's a great player, but it's like the same thing with Brock Bowers. You know, like I think Brock Bowers is a fantastic player. I think Brock Bowers helps the Colts. Do I think if the Colts had Brock Bowers last year, do I think they make the playoffs? No, I don't.
No, I agree.
I don't. And it's the same thing with Tyler Warren. If I think the Colts draft Tyler Warren in the first round and continue to ignore other aspects of their team, do I think now like this can all go away depending on the next 2 months, right?
Free agency, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If they go out and they get, Charvarius Ward and they go out and they get a safety and they add a couple tight ends and they add some depth pieces along the offensive line. And, I feel good about where they're at as far as that goes. I would really have no problem with it. I saw a funny tweet the other day and it was hilarious. It said, the best trait Tyler Warren has is being in the draft a year after Brock Bowers.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
I think that's hilarious. And like I do think that's a thing. Like I think people are going to see Brock Bowers and the success he had. It's going to push that up. And what's so funny too is I get this argument all the time. It's like, well, look at all these teams in the playoffs.
I think them comparing them is just stupid.
Yeah, look at the teams in the playoffs. Like they all have they all have elite tight ends. And that, look at these teams in the playoffs. You know what else those teams have? Top 10 defenses. Every single one of them. If you look at the list of top 10 defenses in the NFL, you will go playoff team, playoff team, playoff team, playoff team, playoff team, playoff team. And if you look at Washington's really the outlier from that. They were in the NFC. They had the 17th overall defense. They had the number 3 pass defense in football, the 3rd best secondary in football. That stuff matters. So whenever I look at like, how can this team make the playoff push? Because that's what I'm looking for is like, I'm looking to win games. I'm not looking for style points. I don't care if this, we get a tight end that goes over 1,100 yards and we miss the playoffs. That does nothing for me. I want to win football games. And so right now, where we sit at the beginning of February, whenever nothing else is done, my sole focus right now is getting the defense from bottom 5 to at least average. If we can get to league average. Now, you would love for them to get the top 10 and love for them to,
I don't think that's realistic unless Lou Anarumo does wonders.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like you would love for that. I don't know if that's in the cards, but I think if you can get a little bit of improvement out of the quarterback.
And there are a couple pieces away. Oh, sorry. There are a couple pieces away on defense from doing that, by the way. There are a couple good pieces away from doing that.
If you can prioritize like your second, like if you can get a guy, even in a trade, like there's, I think a lot of things too, which is kind of funny when it comes to this draft about there not being like elite level talent. I think a lot of issues come from injury. Like I think Benjamin Morrison and Siobhan Ravel, I think both those guys are top 12 players in this class if they did not get injured last year. Obviously the injury happened. That's a part of the game. That is what it is. But so like there's value in this draft to where
and guys like that. I mean, talk about injuries. Cooper DeJean is one of those guys that fell because of this injury. Yeah. And the medical reports can be so different from team to team, which I always found was interesting because I'm not a doctor. How those evaluations can change, and that's how you get a guy like Cooper DeJean. Like, because Cooper DeJean was one of the best players in the class. Like, let's not get that twisted. Like, I think,
but also too, like, I think it's very team dependent. Also, is like, so he was very versatile, right? Like that was his thing, and for me, like part of the reason why I didn't want Cooper DeJean for the Colts at pick 14 or pick 15, wherever they picked last year, 15. Because I know that was in a lot of mocks. It's like Cooper DeJean, and it's kind of the same reason where I'm seeing today. I'm seeing a lot of Jahdae Barron, right, to the Colts. Is they have a similar type of guy that can impact the game that way, and Kenny Moore. I think Kenny Moore is a really good guy that can impact the game in multiple ways in the middle of the field. Great at blitzing, obviously. I mean, this is a Colts podcast. You guys know how good Kenny Moore is. I don't have to explain this to you, but. It's very team dependent. And like a guy like Jahdae Barron, I think is in a very similar vein to Kenny Moore. Very similar type of players. Like they don't need that type of player in the secondary.
There's a lot of there's a lot of like and the thing with the mock drafts, this is really hard. And I put this out as well last week. It's like, it's hard to do it for 32 teams
because you don't know.
You just don't know. Like or it takes so much diving into the team scheme, their needs, what they value. And Jahdae Barron is for me, and I've watched Jahdae Barron, one of my favorite players. I think he's
great player.
Really, really good. Do I think that he can play on the outside? I actually do. Do I think that he's probably going to be a nickel, and a team that would prioritize him as a nickel will draft him significantly higher? Absolutely. And I think the thing because the nickel's a starter in 2023.
It is.
Sorry. Oh my God.
Did you see the tweet I put up?
Yeah. Exactly. And that's something for me as well. It'll be really interesting to me. Because I think that the secondary, there's a lot of pieces that they can upgrade. I liked Trey Amos from Ole Miss. Really enjoyed watching him. I thought he was really good. The safeties in this class are really, really good from what I've watched. I mean, there's a lot of them. I'm a really big fan. I'm sure a lot of people on this podcast are Xavier Watts people. I'm a big Xavier Watts guy. I'm a big, obviously Malachi Starks, I don't think had a 2024 that he liked, but
I think we've hit the Kyle Hamilton stage of Malachi Starks. That's where I think.
What's that mean?
Where people just overanalyzed Kyle Hamilton's game so much that he dropped and fell to Baltimore in the draft. And now, now we're watching him in the NFL because he had like fantastic season and then kind of had a little bit of a down year compared to the season before, and everybody started questioning and then he falls, and then now he's one of the best safeties in football, and everybody's like, oh, how did we let him fall to Baltimore? I think we've hit that on Malachi Starks. I think that's where we're at.
I watched 3 games from 2024 of Malachi Starks, and the first thing I said to myself is I need to watch 2023 because he's the type of guy that he's so athletically gifted, and you can see that.
Well, they moved him around to so many different places.
Exactly. So, and if you do that in a Georgia defense, you're clearly a smart guy. So, a lot of the draft, in my opinion, is overthinking it, and sometimes, and you also have to football's football. The dude's a good player.
Take good players.
Just take good players, and
that's what Philadelphia does every year, and that's why we always say they win the draft. It's because they just let the
4 years in a row.
Yeah, they just let the draft fall to them, and they're like, "Oh, this dude's a great player. We'll just take him."
Yeah,
we have Fletcher Cox. We have, the other defensive tackle they took a year before. Yeah, of course.
Jalen Carter, they lucked into Jalen Carter.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying is people over obviously the situation with all that stuff, and we get that, but that's where teams understand is just don't overcomplicate things.
I agree.
It's so overcom, and that's what people are doing. Malachi Starks, they're completely
totally. The other thing I think we should definitely, because we kind of didn't forget to talk about, is the quarterback. And I think we briefly talked about it on one of our other podcasts, but in terms of free agency or potentially the draft, I think the quarterback narratives potentially have.
No, they're not signing Aaron Rodgers.
Yes. I was sick, so I didn't get a chance to see that was a thing.
I'm sorry.
I think that the quarterback narratives, in my opinion, have taken a little bit too much. Marcus, if you're going to say something.
No, I apologize to Linda because I started it.
On me. Yeah.
So I didn't get to see that, but I think that some of the narratives, because the Colts, when I even watched Brett Ballard's presser, you have to really go watch, because he doesn't really he says they need to bring in competition, but he didn't the way that he phrased it doesn't sound like he's going to go sign Justin Fields. It doesn't sound like he's going to sign Sam Darnold. It doesn't sound like for a second that they've given up on Anthony Richardson. They need something better to hedge their bets if he's to get injured, which he hasn't proved he's been able to do. That's been the biggest concern. And that's what Chris Ballard basically said. He's the biggest concern for us is that he has not started a full season. And we can't bang. I think the quote was we can't bang our head against the wall and we'll bring someone in or whatever, but didn't talk about where or when he would do that. And for me, the Colts want Anthony Richardson to play, and Anthony Richardson will beat out most of the guys here. What they need is a guy that this is the way that I put it. A guy, they don't actually want a quarterback competition because
No.
Anthony Richardson is on every poster, banner, whatever. They drafted Anthony Richardson in the 4th overall pick. They're just going to not start him. Unless they find a Brock Purdy and situation and the guy just like who they bring in absolutely just lights it up. And it's like, we can't not play this guy. Anthony Richardson's the starting quarterback. What he is saying is we need to bring someone in as competition, as a evolution in this development process where we benched him. He came back. He couldn't stay healthy. But we more importantly need a guy that can win us games if Anthony Richardson is to go down, because we can't look in the mirror and expect him to play a full season because he hasn't yet. So that's kind of the situation that I think they're in. I think people should lower their expectations on who the Colts are targeting. I think the guys that I think are realistic possibilities might be like underwhelming and be like, this guy really, like, I think the top options, you have to keep in mind that there are teams out there that are way less desperate for a quarterback than Indianapolis. And I think Landon agrees with me, because if we're absolutely right about we're interested in winning football games, spending the majority of your cap space on a second quarterback makes no sense. That realistically they don't want to even see.
Yeah, they don't want it to happen. And like, actually, I will disagree with one point. I think there's a lot of guys that they could bring in, like a Justin Fields or like a player like that. I don't think Anthony Richardson, unless there's significant improvement this offseason over the next few months, I don't think he would realistically, if they're being honest with themselves, beat them out in camp.
I think if they were to start today, I think Anthony Richardson would beat out Justin Fields in camp.
See, I don't. I disagree.
I think so.
But that being said, I agree 1,000%.
Well, they would have to do it. Sorry, I'd have to watch them do it. I guess I'd have to.
They don't want that to happen. Like, no team really wants a quarterback competition. And any team that tells you they do, they're lying to themselves and they're lying to you. The
old saying, if you have two quarterbacks, you
have no quarterbacks. Yeah. It's the same thing with like the Steelers this year. And the Steelers are now in the same spot where they're like, do we, we benched Justin Fields, even though he was obviously winning football games for him.
He was way better than Russell Wilson.
They kind of outsmarted themselves. And not that Russ was like entirely
horrible. Russ came in and was still a good player. But now they're like, well, do we pay Justin Fields or do we pay this, 36-year-old Russell Wilson? Like, they don't know what they're going to do. Like, because they had two quarterbacks, but they really don't have a quarterback. They still don't have a quarterback. And the Colts don't want to be in that situation. You as a Colts fan, you should want Anthony Richardson to play. You should want him to develop. You should want him to be a good player. You shouldn't continue to root for this kid to fail. That's just stupid. If he fails, then we fail. If he succeeds, then this team has a better chance of succeeding, especially if he turns into what his talent suggests he can turn into. Now, there's no precedent saying that is a likely thing to happen, but you should root for it to happen. You shouldn't root for him to fail. So, yes, based off of this next year, I fully expect them to, what Ben was saying, like they're going to sign some guy and Colts fans are going to be really angry on the internet about it. Be like, Justin Fields was available. This guy was available. Aaron Rodgers was available. Why did they not sign
They're not looking for a starter. They're not. They're looking. What he is saying, what they are saying is we are looking for – here's how I interpreted it, is they are looking for almost like a reclamation project for someone that we don't have to –
like a Sam Darnold with the 49ers.
Kind of, yes. Like that's why I think Zach Wilson's a realistic option. I think Danny Dimes, I saw that up there. I would not rule that out. Jameis Winston isn't necessarily a reclamation project, but that's someone that
please do not bring Jameis.
I love Jameis.
I love Jameis the person. I also think Jameis is an underrated quarterback because people kind of forget. That's interesting. I think that those are the type of players. Marcus Mariota, I think, is another example of those guys. Where like what they are looking for is a heavy investment into a guy that can come in and win games, because Anthony Richardson has not proved to stay healthy. And if he's injured for another year, they have to look themselves in the mirror and say, what are we doing at quarterback? Because he hasn't stayed healthy. We can believe in the talent all we want. And I think the biggest indictment on Anthony Richardson still is not the ability to not stay healthy. It has nothing to do with this. I thought it was a lot of roller coasters, but it wasn't all down like everyone else.
What you knew it was going to be. If
issue
you
is
were being realistic, you knew it was going to be.
If you knew it, yeah. Yes, this is what we saw. Like we can talk about the week 1 throw. We can talk about the Jets game. We can talk about some of that early Broncos performance. We can talk about the Detroit game that he played. I thought he played really well in the Patriots game, obviously, the Tennessee game. But like at the end of the day, if you can't be on the field to continue to develop, it's tough. And that's where it's like, realistically, Anthony Richardson probably has to play all 17 or 15 to give that real 15 plus to give that like real confidence that he can play. So that's where I'm thinking the Colts just need to hedge their bets out of that. And I think that's what it looks like.
And really, like, obviously the injury thing's big too, but like you have to remember too, and like it's an unfortunate aspect, but like it happened. So you have to like factor it in. Is at one point, part of the reason why he missed games was because the on-field product was so bad that they thought a 40-year-old Joe Flacco was a better option.
And some behind the scenes stuff. Yeah.
Sure. And so, I mean, like that has to be factored in too. Is like, can he stay healthy? Has he proven he can actually be on the field medically? Absolutely not. But outside of the splash plays and a few good quarters here and there, the on-field product has also not been good enough.
It's like this. It's literally this. Like it's hard to. It's like there's some really frustrating points because it literally is one thing that you'll see. It's like, oh my, that's good quarterbacking, and then the next thing it's like that's frustrating quarterbacking. And it's not even just looking at the results. It's also looking like basic things like you can see that his eyes.
Well, the results. I mean, it's actually kind of funny that they had a winning record with him as quarterback. They were 6 and.
I know. I think my hottest take is actually Anthony Richardson did less to lose games than the defense did. So like, he did more to win games for the Colts than
I agree, and that's why I have the feeling I have about like why I'm so bullish on fixing this defense and maybe ignoring tight end in the first round. Is I think Richardson, if he continues if he develops to begin with, because he actually regressed this year from 2023. So if he develops into like a bigger at a higher level this year into even if it's just 10% better, 20% better, doesn't have to be 1,000%.
I don't think it's realistic to ask him to come in and then just like be prime Cam Newton or have an MVP year. I think that's the pressure that comes with the 4th overall pick. That's the pressure that's going to happen. For me, I think I want to see significant improvement.
I do.
And continuing to get better as the season goes along while staying healthy.
Yeah, I don't want to see regression.
And that's
but I think he is already good enough, especially whenever you factor in the run game with Jonathan Taylor, which should be their bread and butter moving forward.
They need to dial it back a little bit, in my opinion. Like Anthony, I think they were diving a little. They went into the quarterback run game post benching as a way to kickstart the offense, and it absolutely works. When you think about the Colts offense, they were 17th, like you mentioned. They did some things at a very elite level. I think they were one of the best short yardage offenses and one of the best low red zone offenses, if I can remember correctly.
Yeah, the problem was getting into the red zone.
The problem was getting into.
Once they got there, they were fine.
Yeah, they have dominant. And they were really good in those gotta have it moments for the most part, I would say.
Yeah, and he's shown that and I think that's really underrated when you're talking about him. It's because a lot of things like you can't really teach this. It's not something like it's either one of those things where you have it or you don't. And I think he has it. I think he's proven he has it. That
I'm bullish on
it. When the game is on the line, can you carry your team on your back and make a play and win a ball game?
And he did it multiple times, twice.
Yes. Yeah,
and I think that's has to go without saying. So, all in all, I think the biggest thing that you can say about Anthony Richardson, have to find a way to stay on the field medically, have to turn this into a little bit more like this. And it's not going to look perfect at times. There's going to be interceptions. There's going to be ugly throws. You're hoping that some of the one thing about Anthony Richardson that I think can also be frustrating is he can make some plays that literally no one else on the field can, but he can't make the ones that everyone else can make. And that's where I think that's
perfect.
Like that's literally how exactly the best way to describe Anthony Richardson. And a little bit more of making, and that's what gives me the confidence too. It's like when you look at Anthony Richardson, it's like, can we get you to throw a 5-yard speed out? Like, can we get you to throw a check down when the play breaks down? Can we get you to marry up your eyes to your feet and kind of streamline your reads a little bit better? I'd love to see that.
Yeah, and this is his 3rd year in the same offense too. So like there should be no like lag.
There's no excuse. And you have the Alec Pierce in the deep ball. And I think I was a little bit disappointed in the evolution of the Colts offense because they really tried to lean into Anthony Richardson's arm strength. There was a lot of play action, 5-step drop, deep shots down the field. Everyone starts talking about the completion percentage. And I'm looking at these 2 games, the Houston game in week 1, I'm looking at the Green Bay game. I'm thinking to myself, look at the time of possession right now. Can't stop the run. Long drives from the defense. And then 3 explosive plays to march right down the field, and the time of possession wasn't there. What happened to like the RPOs, some of the quick game, which like doesn't
like getting the ball out quick. Like and like I know he struggles to hit that stuff too, but like you just can't completely erase it from your playbook, especially if you do want the completion percentage to look good. Like,
and I'm not a big, I don't care what
is he accurate? No. He's not.
He's making tough throws. Like he's
Well, no, but I mean just in general. Like whenever you're looking at like on target percentage and stuff, technically, he is the least accurate quarterback of the last 25 years. Yes, I get all that, but you can manufacture that a little bit to where it's just not so like screen. Like I thought he was actually really, the screen game with Michael Pittman and AD Mitchell, I thought worked at times. Whenever they do inevitably get a new tight end, whether it is like an Elijah Arroyo, whether it's a Tyler Warren, whether it's whoever it is, the tight end screen game was such a big part of Shane Steichen's playbook in Philadelphia with Dallas Goedert, like a massive part that they haven't had here. They've tried it with Kylan Granson and tried it with a few guys, Drew Ogletree, but those guys just
ran a couple to Mo as well.
Yeah, but they're just not the caliber of player those other guys are.
Exactly.
So, I think getting more screens, whether it's with a tight end or just stuff like that, I think can improve that completion percentage. But make no mistake about it, dude's got some big improvements to make this offseason, and we're gonna be able to tell very early in training camp if those improvements were made. It's we'll see how it goes. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be worked on, but
I also think it's the type of thing too where it's like, just to get kind of close a loop on this one, is
right.
Like I think all in all, the Colts want Anthony Richardson to start. They're investing into his future. I think the team is behind him and wants to see him succeed on the other end of this crazy 2024. I know there was a lot of adversity that they faced, but at the end of the day, you have to close the book on 2024 and open the one on 2025. And I think that they would prefer that Anthony Richardson is in the first page and in the credits of the 2025 season. So I don't think that you're going to see a scenario where they're just giving up and they're going to try and go toe for toe in negotiations, trying to sign Sam Darnold or Justin Fields. Like that's just not happening. So I do think they're going to identify a guy. I think Zach Wilson is realistic. I think Danny Dimes is realistic. I think Marcus Mariota, Taylor Heineke, maybe not Taylor Heineke, but definitely some guys in that kind of B tier of guys that you've either written off already that had some talent in college, or potentially someone that you would consider a career backup. I think that's more what the Colts are looking for.
Yeah, I hope so, man. It's going to be interesting. Like this whole offseason is going to be fun, exciting. Definitely nerve-wracking.
Way more exciting than last year.
I agree.
Last year was very obvious. Last year was very obvious that they were going to run it back. Now, did we think they were going to run it back to the degree they did? No. And I think that little mistake proved to have a huge ripple effect. But this year, I think will be a lot better in terms of excitement. We're going to have a lot more things to talk about for sure.
Yeah, right. For sure.
And that's the hope, right? That's the hope. Like until it actually happens, everybody should be completely bullish on it. Because
I'm probably more confident than the Colts fans that it's going to happen, because when you read a press conference, like he can't.
Oh, I think it's going to happen.
Like it's going to happen.
But
I get it. I know what you mean. Like
I need to see it. That's my whole thing with this entire team and this. I need to see it.
Yeah, definitely.
Prove it.
Definitely, for sure. But you guys got to stay tuned, turn on your notifications. Follow us on all platforms. We are everywhere. Just look up the Blue Stable Podcast. We appreciate you guys for tuning into this episode. Shout out to the almost 500 in here. Shout out to Coach Finrum. Shout out to Landon for tuning in today as well.
Shout out my boy Jared, too, by the way.
Shout out to
birthday.
Jay. Yeah, I know. I seen that too. I was laughing earlier.
40th birthday today. Turned 40
Hey,
years
happy
old
birthday,
today.
Jared.
Let's go, baby.
On your birthday. You could be anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. That's so thoughtful.
Yeah, congratulations. Just got married last week, too, so congratulations.
Congratulations.
Well, he's just living it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Got a baby on the way in September. Yeah.
Look at this guy.
Heck of a 2025 start.
I'm telling you, it's only 2 months.
Heck of a start for him. So.
Wow.
Yeah, happy for him.
Shout out to Jared, man. Appreciate you guys, man. Also, before we get out of here, like I said, stay tuned. And my final words before I close it, shout out to Super Bowl champion LeRaven Clark. That is all, you guys. Stay tuned and have a good night.